In the cynical sprawl of the 21st century, heroes are not born of myth or divine clay. They are manufactured in sterile labs and polished by marketing executives in high-rise boardrooms. But what happens when a being of genuine divinity, a warrior princess bound by an immutable code of truth, crashes into a world where truth is just a variable in a PR equation? The sky over Midtown Manhattan did not tear open with a roar of jet engines or the hum of a Vought patented transport. It shattered with the crystalline ring of a lightning strike, a violent displacement of reality that left a crater in the center of 42nd Street. From the settling dust emerged a woman clad in gold, red, and eagle-crested bronze, her eyes scanning the sea of glowing rectangles held aloft by a terrified, filming crowd. She was a goddess in a world of influencers, and Vought International was about to learn that some legends cannot be bought, rebranded, or broken. If you're hungry for tales of what-if scenarios that shake the foundations of the status quo, hit subscribe and join the crusade for more content. The truth is a dangerous weapon, and we are about to see it wielded against the most powerful corporation on Earth. The air in Manhattan tasted of metallic dust and the acrid stench of ozone. To Diana of Themyscira, it was a sensory assault. Her ears, tuned to the whisper of wind through the olive groves of Paradise Island, were suddenly hammered by the cacophony of sirens, the rhythmic thrum of idling engines, and the frantic, shallow heartbeats of thousands of mortals. She stood in the center of a smoking impact crater, her boots crunching on the pulverized asphalt, and the lasso of truth hummed at her hip. A faint, rhythmic, golden pulse that seemed to react to the overwhelming density of lies permeating the very atmosphere of this city. She looked up. The architecture was familiar, yet distorted. The buildings reached for the heavens not in worship, but in greed, plastered with gargantuan digital screens displaying faces of heroes who looked more like soap opera stars than warriors. A man in a blue suit with a star-spangled cape, a woman in a silver tiara that looked like a cheap imitation of Diana's own, a man in black tactical armor. They were everywhere, on billboards, on the sides of buses, and now descending from the sky. The crowd didn't run. That was the first thing Diana noticed. In her world, a dimensional rift usually meant an invasion of parademons or a manifestation of the Greek underworld. The people fled for their lives. Here, they held up small glowing rectangles, their faces illuminated by a pale blue light. They were filming her. They were waiting for the show to begin. "Control your breathing," Diana whispered to herself, a mantra of the Amazonian god. Observe, analyze, act. The sound of sonic booms signaled their arrival. 3 figures broke the cloud line. Leading them was the man from the billboards, Homelander. He descended with a grace that felt practiced, his cape fluttering in a way that seemed designed for a camera lens rather than the aerodynamics of flight. Beside him, Queen Maeve landed with a heavy thud, her expression a mask of bored indifference that hid a flickering spark of genuine curiosity. The Deep landed last, splashing into a burst fire hydrant and posing as if he were on a magazine cover. The Homelander stepped forward, his boots clicking on the cracked road. His smile was dazzling, teeth a perfect, blinding white, eyes a clear, predatory blue. He radiated a power that was undeniably vast, yet to Diana's divine senses, it felt wrong. It lacked the ancient, grounded resonance of a god or the disciplined spirit of a hero. It felt like a pressurized tank of volatile chemicals, ready to burst. "Well now," Homelander said, his voice amplified by the natural acoustics of the street and his own lung capacity. "That is quite a look. Very retro. Very Themyscira." He glanced at a small earpiece, likely receiving data from a support team Diana couldn't see. "Is that what we're calling it? I don't remember you in the Vought database, sweetheart, and I know everyone who's anyone." Diana stood her ground. to her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her sword. The God Killer. I am Diana of Themyscira, daughter of Hippolyta. I do not know of this Vought, nor do I know why I have been cast into this realm, but I sense a great disturbance in the air and a darkness in your heart, man of the stars. The crowd gasped. Homelander's smile didn't falter, but his eyes twitched. It was a micro-expression, a flash of murderous intent that lasted less than a millisecond, but to an Amazon trained in the art of the duel, it was as loud as a thunderclap. Ooh, she's feisty, Homelander chuckled, turning to the crowd and waving. The cheers were deafening. I think she's a little confused, probably a rogue soup from one of the international programs. Don't worry, folks. The 7 are here. We'll get her the help she needs. Maeve stepped closer, and her eyes scanning Diana's armor. She saw the genuine bronze, the intricate Greek engravings, and the way Diana's posture never broke. Unlike the other soups, who stood for the cameras, Diana stood for a fight. Look, kid, Maeve said, her voice a low rasp that didn't carry to the microphones. Whatever your deal is, just play along. Don't resist. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. I have stepped into a den of vipers, Diana replied, her voice ringing with a clarity that seemed to cut through the city's noise. Why do you wear the symbols of a warrior if you have no honor? The Deep stepped forward, trying to reclaim some of the spotlight. Hey, babe, maybe cool it with the honor talk. We're the good guys. We're the 7. Why don't you come back to the tower and we can talk about a sponsorship deal? You've got great delts. You'd kill it in the fitness demographic. Diana's response was a silent, blistering stare. She looked at the Deep not as a hero, but as a minor nuisance. I do not seek gold or fame. I seek the truth of this place. Before the confrontation could escalate, a fleet of black-armored SUVs swerved into the crater, sirens wailing. Men in high-tech tactical gear, Vaught's private security force, spilled out, creating a perimeter that pushed the civilians back. A woman with sharp blonde hair and a suit that cost more than a mid-sized car stepped out of the lead vehicle. Madeline Stillwell. Stillwell didn't look at the carnage or the crater. She looked at Diana's face, then at her own tablet, her fingers flying across the screen. Unregistered, unprecedented power levels, no compound V signature on the local scanners. Wait, that can't be right. She looked up, her professional mask firmly in place. I'm Madeline Stillwell, Senior Vice President of Hero Management for Vought International. You've caused quite a bit of property damage, Miss Diana. But we're willing to overlook that if we can sit down and have a civilized conversation. Diana looked at the soldiers, then at Homelander, who was currently floating a few inches off the ground, looking down on her with a patronizing smirk. She could feel the lasso of truth vibrating. This entire world was built on a foundation of deception. These people weren't heroes. They were actors, and the man of the stars above her was the most dangerous actor of them all. You speak of civilization while surrounded by weapons, Diana said, her voice echoing off the glass towers. But I see you are the one who holds the leashes of these performers. I will come with you for now. I wish to see this tower of yours. I wish to see the heart of this world. Great. Wonderful, Stillwell said, gesturing toward the SUV. We'll get you some water, some clothes that are a bit more current, and we'll talk about your future. As Diana climbed into the back of the reinforced vehicle, she caught Queen Maeve's eye. The older woman looked tired, not physically, but deep in her soul. It was the look of someone who had once believed in something and had watched it be ground into the dirt for a decade. The SUV door closed with a heavy, pressurized thud. Diana sat in the plush leather interior, the silence of the car a stark contrast to the chaos outside. And she looked out the tinted window as they drove toward the monolith that was Vought Tower. She saw a young girl in the crowd, wearing a cheap plastic cape with Homelander's logo on it. The girl wasn't looking at Homelander. She was looking at Diana. She was looking at the woman who hadn't smiled for the cameras, who hadn't posed, and who had spoken of honor. In that moment, Diana realized her mission. She hadn't been sent here to find a way home. She had been sent here because this world was starving for a real hero. And if she had to burn down the Temple of Vought to show them the light, then she would be the fire. The journey to Vought Tower was a blur of neon and glass. Inside the car, Stillwell was already on a conference call. "Yes, I want the trademark filed by the time we hit the parking garage." Wonder Woman. "No, it sounds too much like a 70s show. Let's go with the Amazon. Or maybe just Themis." "No, the Amazon is better. Run it through the 18 to 34 male quadrant and get a team on her armor. I want to know if it's a new alloy or just high-end prop work." Diana ignored her. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, trying to feel the presence of the gods. But the heavens were silent. There was no Athena to offer wisdom, no Hermes to provide speed. She was truly alone in a world of monsters disguised as men. But as she felt the weight of her braces and the steady pulse of her own divine blood, she knew that was enough. The car descended into the subterranean depths of Vought Tower, a fortress of corporate might. As the elevator rose toward the 99th floor, Diana felt the pressure in her ears. So she was ascending into the heavens of this new world. But as the doors opened to reveal the opulent, cold splendor of the Seven's meeting room, she didn't see a pantheon. She saw a cage, and she was the only one who knew how to break the bars. Homelander was already there, leaning against the massive conference table, a glass of milk in his hand. He watched her enter with an expression that was no longer friendly. The cameras were gone. The public was gone. Now there was only the Predator and the Goddess. "Welcome home, Diana," he said, his voice dropping an octave, losing its boyish charm. "I hope you're ready to learn the rules. Because in this house, there's only one person who gets to talk about truth, and you're looking at him." Diana walked to the window, looking out over the sprawling, broken beauty of New York. So she didn't look back at him. "Truth is not a privilege, John. It is a requirement, and I suspect you have spent a very long time hiding from yours." The air in the room suddenly turned cold. Homelander's eyes began to glow a faint, ominous red. The war for the soul of the 21st century had just begun. Diana tilted her head, observing the micro-tremors in Homelander's jaw. "And if I do not? If I choose to walk out of this tower and seek the truth on my own?" Homelander's smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then you're an unregistered soupy, a threat to national security, and I'd have to take you down. And believe me, that would be very, very bad for the brand." "You threaten me with violence while wearing the colors of your people," Diana said softly. "You're not a hero, John. You're a bully who has never been challenged." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the deep stopped fidgeting. No one spoke to Homelander that way. Queen Maeve, who had been nursing a drink in the corner, looked up, a flicker of something, hope, perhaps, or terror, crossing her face. Stillwell cleared her throat, sensing the imminent explosion. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Diana, we have a unique opening. After the unfortunate departure of Translucent, the public is looking for a new face, someone strong, someone principled. You fit the Wonder Woman archetype perfectly, though we'll need to tweak the name for copyright reasons. We're thinking the Sentinel. It's strong, gender-neutral, and tests well with the Heartland." "I will not change my name," Diana stated firmly, "and I will not sign your contracts. However, I will remain. I see now that this world is in desperate need of a teacher. I will join your Seven, not as your employee, but as a reminder of what a hero should be." Stillwell exchanged a look with Homelander. The corporate executive saw a gold mine that needed breaking. The psychopath saw a toy he wanted to dismantle. "But we can work with an independent contractor status for now," Stillwell conceded. but you'll need to undergo an orientation, media training, power scaling tests, and a briefing on our current legal liabilities. We have a reputation to maintain. My training was conducted by Antiope, the greatest general the world has ever known, Diana said. I require no orientation from bureaucrats, but I will observe your methods. The following hours were a descent into the surreal. Diana was led through the labyrinthine corridors of Vought, a place where heroism was quantified in spreadsheets. She saw rooms filled with writers, drafting spontaneous, heroic quips. Costume designers debating the exact shade of red that would inspire trust without being too aggressive, and lawyers reviewing body cam footage to ensure no excessive force lawsuits could be filed. It was in the training facility, a massive, reinforced gymnasium, that the first real friction occurred. The seven were gathered for a routine power demonstration for a group of high-level investors watching through reinforced glass. "All right, Sentinel," Homelander said, deliberately using the name she had rejected. "Show the nice people what you can do. Let's start with the weights. We've got a 10-ton block over there. Why don't you see if you can lift it without popping a vein?" Diana looked at the massive block of lead and steel. She walked toward it, her movements fluid and economical. She didn't grunt or strain. No, she placed her hands beneath the edge and lifted it above her head in one smooth motion, holding it aloft with a single hand. The investors behind the glass began to murmur, their tablets lighting up with data. "Impressive," Homelander admitted, though his tone was dripping with condescension. "But lifting is easy. Let's see how you handle a real threat. A-Train, give her a workout." A-Train didn't wait. He was a blur of blue and white, a sonic boom echoing through the gym as he circled Diana. He was trying to disorient her, a tactic he used on common criminals to make them vomit before he even struck. To the human eye, he was invisible. To Diana, he was a clumsy, frantic amateur. She could see the strain in his tendons, the way he leaned too far into his turns, relying entirely on raw power rather than technique. As he swung a high-speed punch aimed at the back of her head, Diana didn't even turn around. She simply raised her left bracer. Clang! The sound of the impact vibrated through the entire floor. A-Train let out a yelp as his fist met the indestructible Amazonian metal. The recoil sent him tumbling across the floor, sliding into a rack of weights with a deafening crash. "You should learn to lead with your mind, not your ego," Diana said, her voice calm as she lowered her arm. Homelander's eyes flared red. "He was just playing, sweetheart. Let's try something with a bit more kick." He didn't signal. He didn't warn. He simply unleashed two beams of searing red heat from his eyes. The investors gasped. Stillwell in the observation booth went pale. This wasn't part of the script. Diana's instincts, honed over centuries of combat against Ares and his brood, took over. She crossed her bracers in front of her face. When the heat vision struck the silver metal, it didn't burn through. It didn't even push her back. The divine metal absorbed the energy, glowing with a white-hot intensity before Diana threw her arms outward, dispersing the energy in a brilliant shock wave that shattered the reinforced glass of the observation deck and sent the investors diving for cover. Smoke rose from her braces, but Diana's expression remained unchanged. She stepped through the haze, her eyes locked on Homelander. "Is this how you greet a comrade? With the intent to kill?" Homelander hovered a few inches off the ground, his chest heaving. He had never seen anyone, not even Maeve, withstand his heat vision so effortlessly. For the first time in his life, he felt a cold prickle of genuine fear, which he immediately masked with a mask of theatrical outrage. "Just testing your reflexes," he shouted, laughing for the benefit of the shaken investors. "See, she's tough, a real addition to the team." But as the test ended and the investors were hurried away by Vought PR teams, the atmosphere in the gym turned poisonous. The other members of the Seven stood back, watching the two of them. They saw the truth. A wolf had just realized there was a lion in the pen. Queen Maeve walked over to Diana as the others dispersed. She looked at the smoldering marks on the floor where Homelander's heat vision had missed. "You're an idiot," Maeve whispered, her voice devoid of its usual sarcasm. "You just showed him he can't kill you with a look. Do you have any idea how much more dangerous that makes him?" "He should be afraid," Diana replied. "Fear is the beginning of wisdom." "Not for him," Maeve said, turning away. "For him, fear is the beginning of a massacre." Diana was shown to her quarters, a penthouse suite in the tower that was more of a high-tech prison than a home. It was filled with Vought-branded merchandise, including a prototype Sentinel action figure that had been 3D printed in the time it took her to finish the power test. She ignored the toys and the silk sheets. She sat on the floor in the center of the room, legs crossed, and placed her Lasso of Truth before her. She needed to know the soul of this place. She reached out, not with her hands, but with her spirit, touching the ambient energy of the building. In her world, cities had spirits, the collective will of the people. New York, in this world, felt like a wounded animal, its spirit choked by the black, oily influence of compound fee and the suffocating weight of a million small lies. A knock at the door interrupted her meditation. It wasn't the heavy, arrogant stride of Homelander or the clicked heels of Stillwell. It was a soft, hesitant sound. Diana rose and opened the door. Standing there was Annie January, Starlight. She was wearing her pristine white and gold uniform, her eyes wide and rimmed with red, as if she had been crying. She held a small tablet in her hand, her fingers trembling. I'm Annie," she stammered. "I'm new here too. Well, newer than the others. I saw what you did in the gym. I saw how you stood up to him." Diana stepped aside, inviting her in. "You are the one they call Starlight. I've seen your image. You are marketed as the light of this world." Annie let out a hollow, bitter laugh, stepping into the room. "Yeah, light. That's what they told me in Des Moines. They said I'd be saving people. They said I'd be making a difference." She looked at Diana, her voice breaking. "But it's all a lie. All of it. They're monsters, Diana. The things they do, the things they let happen. I thought I was the only one who saw it, or the only one who cared." Diana walked to the younger woman and placed a hand on her shoulder. The warmth of the Amazonian princess seemed to ground Annie, stilling her tremors. "You are not alone, Annie January. Truth is a bright sun. It can be hidden by clouds, but it is never extinguished." "They'll break you," Annie whispered. "Look, they have a way of finding the thing you love and using it to turn you into them. They can only break what is built on sand," Diana said. "My foundation is stone. Tell me, Annie. Tell me everything they have hidden. Let us see if their tower can withstand the light of the truth." As Starlight began to speak, detailing the sexual assaults, the collateral damage, and the cold-blooded murders covered up by Vought Legal, Diana's grip on her lasso tightened. She had come to this world looking for a way home, but she realized now that her mother's lessons were meant for times such as these. A warrior does not seek the battle, but she does not flee from the cry of the innocent. Outside the window, the sun was setting over New York, casting long, dark shadows across the city. In the heart of Vought Tower, and a goddess and a girl began to weave a web of their own, not one of marketing and lies, but of justice and retribution. High above them, in his own private sanctum, Homelander sat in the dark, watching the footage of Diana lifting the weight over and over again. He paused the video at the moment she looked into the camera, a look of pure, unadulterated judgment. He leaned forward, his face inches from the screen, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed, his voice trembling with a cocktail of lust and loathing. "I'm going to make you scream. I'm going to make you beg for Vought to save you." He didn't know that Diana could hear his heart rate from 3 floors down. She heard the jagged, uneven rhythm of his madness. and for the first time since she arrived in this dark, cynical world, Diana of Themyscira smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had finally found a worthy hunt. The golden glow of the Lasso of Truth didn't just illuminate the room. It seemed to vibrate with a low, harmonic frequency that resonated with the very molecules of the air. As Annie January, Starlight, spoke, the rope pulsed in sync with her heartbeat. Every confession of Vaught's depravity, from the accidental civilian casualties and generic urban pacification to the harrowing details of her own initiation into the Seven, acted as a drop of fuel on a fire. Diana listened with the stillness of a statue, her divine patience masking a growing tectonic rage. To an Amazon, there was no greater sin than the corruption of the youthful spirit, and here, in this glass tomb, corruption was the primary currency. "They have files on everyone, Diana," Annie whispered, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Bank accounts, family members. See every mistake you've ever made. They call it leverage. If you don't do what they want, they don't just fire you. They erase you. They turn the whole world against you with a single press release." Diana looked at the glowing rope. "A weapon that strikes at the soul is more cowardly than a blade in the back. But they cannot leverage what they do not understand. They look at me and see a marketable demographic. They do not see a daughter of the gods." She reached out, her fingers grazing the lasso. "I have fought the god of war himself, Annie. I have stood at the gates of Tartarus and told the dead to remain silent. Vought is a corporation of paper and ink. Paper burns." The conversation was interrupted by a low, rhythmic thudding from the hallway. It wasn't a footstep. It was the sound of air being displaced. Diana felt the pressure change before the door even opened. She didn't stand, but her posture shifted, her muscles coiling like a leopard's. The door hissed open, and Homelander floated into the room. He didn't use the floor. He hovered 6 inches above the plush carpet, a deliberate display of his detachment from the mortal world. He held a glass of milk in one hand, swirling it with a slow, hypnotic motion. Behind him stood Black Noir, the silent sentinel of the Seven, his masked face a void that revealed nothing. "Annie," Homelander said, his voice dripping with a false paternal warmth that made the hair on the back of Diana's neck stand up. "I thought I told you to get some rest. We have the Save the Children gala tomorrow. You need your eyes to be bright, not puffy from crying with the new girl." Starlight scrambled to her feet, her hands glowing with a faint, nervous electricity. I was just showing Diana the layout of the building, Homelander. Helping her get settled." "Is that what we're calling it?" Homelander drifted closer, his eyes flicking to the lasso on the floor. "That's a pretty toy, Diana. Glowing rope. A bit on the nose for the whole ancient Greek vibe, don't you think? What does it do? Tie up your hair, or do you use it for something kinkier?" Diana rose slowly, her height nearly matching his even while he was airborne. She didn't flinch as he invaded her personal space. "It is the lasso of Hestia. It does not tie the body so much as it binds the spirit. It forces one to see themselves as they truly are, stripped of masks and titles. Would you like to try it? John?" The use of his first name, the name he had buried under layers of ego and corporate branding, hit him like a physical blow. His smile didn't just falter, it vanished. The air in the room grew cold, the temperature dropping as his internal fury began to bleed out. Black Noir shifted his weight, his hand moving toward the hilt of a combat knife at his thigh. "You're very brave when the cameras are off, aren't you?" Homelander hissed. He took a sip of the milk, his eyes never leaving hers. "You think you're special because my lasers didn't turn your brain into soup. You think because you've got divine blood or whatever bullshit Stillwell is writing for your bio that you're an equal. But you aren't. I'm the only one here. I'm the only one who matters. Everyone else is just props. Young props that don't work get thrown in the trash." "You are a child playing at being a king," Diana replied. her voice a calm, resonant contrast to his jagged tension. You surround yourself with silence and fear because you know that the moment anyone speaks the truth, your kingdom will crumble. You are not a god, John. You are a lonely man who is terrified of being forgotten. Homelander's jaw tightened so hard Diana heard the bone creak. For a moment, she expected him to strike. She wanted him to strike. She wanted him to reveal his true nature here, in this room, so she could end his reign before another drop of innocent blood was spilled. But Homelander was a creature of Vought. He had been trained by the best manipulators in the world. He took a deep breath, his chest expanding, and forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "So, she's a riot, isn't she, Noir?" Homelander turned to the silent ninja, who gave a single, slow nod. "I like her. I really do. She's got that unconquerable thing going on. It's going to be so much fun to watch it break." He looked back at Diana, his eyes glowing a faint, sinister pink. "Tomorrow at the gala, you'll wear the outfit Vought picked out. You'll stand on the stage, and you'll tell the world how honored you are to serve beside me. If you don't, well, Annie here has a very lovely mother in Iowa. It would be a shame if she had a soup terrorist-related accident." Annie let out a small, choked gasp. Diana's hand moved toward her sword, but she forced herself to stop. She was in a different kind of war now. In the DC universe, the enemy was usually clear. A monster to be slain, a villain to be imprisoned. Here, the enemy was a system that used the innocent as human shields. "I will be there," Diana said, her voice like iron. "Good girl," Homelander smirked. He drifted toward the door, then paused. "And Diana, put the rope away. It's a tripping hazard." As the door closed, Annie sank back onto the bed, her face buried in her hands. I told you they'd find the leverage." Diana walked to the window, watching the lights of New York. The city looked like a circuit board, cold and calculating. "They think they have found my weakness. They believe that because I value life, I'm easily controlled. They have forgotten that a warrior's greatest weapon is not her strength, but her resolve." She turned to Annie. "You said Vought has files. Where are they kept? Not just the digital ones, the raw data. The evidence they haven't yet scrubbed." "The legend knows," Annie whispered. "Or at least, that's the rumor. But nobody goes to him. He's a ghost. But there's a group. People who hate the soups. They call themselves the Boys. They might have something." "The Boys," Diana repeated, the name sounding foreign on her tongue. "A crude name for those who would stand against giants. Where do I find these boys?" "I don't know," Annie said, "but they usually find us. They're like shadows. If you start causing enough trouble for Vought, they'll reach out. But Diana, if Homelander finds out you're talking to them, he won't just kill you. He'll level a city block just to make a point." "Then I must make sure he is too busy to look," Diana said. She looked at her armor, the bronze reflecting the moonlight. To the world, she was the Sentinel, a new product for the Vought catalog. To herself, she was a spy in the house of the enemy. The next morning, the Vought machine was in full swing. A team of stylists, makeup artists, and brand consultants descended upon Diana's suite. They brought a new version of her armor, a streamlined set made of high-impact plastics and chrome that lacked the soul of her Amazonian gear. "It's more aspirational," one stylist chirped, trying to apply a shimmer dust to Diana's shoulders. "The bronze is a bit dusty. This says future. This says Vought." Diana pushed the man's hand away. "I will wear my own armor. I do not dress for aspiration. I dress for battle." "But the contract? The contract is for my presence," Diana interrupted, her gaze making the stylist visibly tremble. "My presence is in this armor. If you wish me to stand on your stage, you will accept the bronze." After an hour of frantic phone calls to Stillwell, the stylists relented. Diana refused the makeup, the hairstyling, and the jewelry. She stood in the center of the room, a relic of a more honorable age surrounded by the vapid glitter of the modern world. The gala was held at the Waldorf Astoria, a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns that cost more than the average American's yearly salary. Every major player in New York was there. Politicians, CEOs, and the elite of the entertainment industry. They weren't there for the charity. They were there to be seen in the presence of the Seven. Diana stood in the wings of the grand stage, watching Homelander charm the crowd. He was a master of the medium, leaning into the microphone with a wink and a smile that convinced every person in the room that he was their personal protector. And now, Homelander's voice boomed. I want to introduce the newest member of our family. She's a bit mysterious, she's incredibly powerful, and she's here to show us that the old legends are true. Please welcome the Sentinel. Diana stepped out onto the stage. The applause was thunderous, a wall of sound that would have disoriented a lesser being. The flashbulbs were like a barrage of miniature explosions. She walked to the center of the stage, standing beside Homelander. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, a gesture of dominance disguised as camaraderie. Tell them, Sentinel, Homelander whispered, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and milk. And tell them how much you love it here. Diana looked out at the crowd. She saw the greed in their eyes, the superficiality of their smiles. But she also saw the servers in the back, the security guards at the doors, the little people that Vought treated as background noise. She leaned into the microphone. I am Diana of Themyscira, she said, her voice bypassing the speakers and hitting the back of the room with natural power. I have been told this is a celebration of saving the children. But in my land, we do not celebrate the duty of protection. We simply perform it. A hero is not defined by the applause of the powerful, but by the safety of the weak. The crowd went silent. This wasn't the script. Stillwell, watching from the wings, began gesturing frantically for the band to start playing. Thus, Vought International has welcomed me, Diana continued, ignoring Homelander's grip tightening on her shoulder until her armor began to groan. But I have found that their towers are tall because they are built on the silence of those they have stepped upon. If you wish to truly save the children, do not look to the sky for a savior in a cape. Look to your own hearts and ask why you allow your safety to be a product for sale. Homelander's face was a mask of controlled, homicidal rage. He leaned in, his voice a low growl meant only for her. You just committed suicide, bitch. No, Diana whispered back, her eyes shining with divine light. I just started a conversation. The band began to play a frantic, upbeat tempo, and Homelander forced a laugh, much waving to the confused crowd as if Diana's speech had been a piece of edgy performance art. He practically dragged her off the stage the moment the curtains drew. You're done, Homelander snarled the moment they were in the hallway. I don't care what Stillwell says. I'm going to fly you into the upper atmosphere and drop you. Let's see how divine you are when you hit the pavement at terminal velocity. Try it, Diana challenged, her hand hovering over her lasso. Hey, hey! A voice called out from the shadows of the service corridor. A man stepped into the light. He was wearing a rumpled suit and had the look of someone who hadn't slept since the late 90s. He was holding a camera, but it wasn't a standard media rig. It was an old, modified Leica. Great speech, sister, the man said, his accent a thick, gravelly London snarl. Not a bit wordy for the Yanks, but the sentiment was spot on. Built on silence. I like that. I might put it on a t-shirt. Homelander turned his heat vision toward the intruder. Who the fuck are you? This is a restricted area. Name's Billy Butcher, the man said, completely unfazed by the glowing red eyes of the world's most powerful soup. He took a long drag of a cigarette, blowing the smoke directly into Homelander's face. And I'm the bloke who's going to help the lady here burn your little clubhouse to the ground. Now, why don't you be a good little cunt and run along? The grown-ups need to talk. Diana looked at the man. This Butcher, he smelled of gunpowder, cheap beer and a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight. He was exactly what Annie had described. He was the shadow that follows the light. As Homelander moved to strike, but at that moment, every fire alarm in the hotel began to scream. A series of small, controlled explosions rocked the basement, cutting the power to the entire block. In the sudden darkness, Diana felt a hand on her arm. Not a forceful grip, but a firm, guiding one. "This way, Your Majesty," Butcher said in the dark. "Unless you'd rather stay for the dessert course. I hear the lemon tart is to die for. Literally." Diana looked back at Homelander, whose eyes were two red coals in the blackness. "This is not over, John." "You're right," Homelander's voice echoed through the corridor. "It's just getting started." Diana followed Butcher into the service elevator. As they descended into the bowels of the hotel, she realized she had finally left the theater. She was in the trenches now. And in the trenches, the truth wasn't a speech, it was a weapon. The service elevator descended with a rhythmic, mechanical groan that felt honest compared to the silent, predatory lifts of Vought Tower. In the cramped space, the air was thick with the scent of Billy Butcher's cheap tobacco and the ozone still clinging to Diana's braces. She observed him with a warrior's eye, the way he balanced his weight, the calluses on his hands, and the utter lack of fear in his presence. To most mortals, Homelander was a god to be worshipped or a force of nature to be feared. To Butcher, he was clearly just a target. "You take a hell of a risk, William Butcher," Diana said as the floor indicator ticked downward. "Calling a man like that a cunt to his face is either the height of bravery or a very elaborate form of suicide." Butcher let out a dry, hacking chuckle, adjusting the lapels of his coat. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Love. When you've spent as much time in the dirt as I have, you realize these gods bleed just like anyone else. They just need a bit more encouragement to start. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on the god-killer's sword strapped to her back. "Nice toothpick. Hope it's not just for show. We're going to need something that can cut through more than just red tape." The elevator doors hissed open into the hotel's loading dock. A nondescript white van sat idling near the bins, its back doors swinging open as they approached. Inside, Diana saw a chaotic nest of monitors, signal jammers, and 3 men who looked as if they hadn't seen the sun in a week. One was a massive, bearded man with a surprisingly gentle face. Another was a lean, twitchy Frenchman with goggles pushed up onto his forehead. And the third was a young man with a terrified expression that Diana recognized instantly, the look of a civilian who had seen too much. "Everyone, meet the new hire," Butcher announced, gesturing toward Diana. "The Princess of Themyscira. Your Highness, meet the boys. That's Mother's Milk. Don't ask about the name. Frenchie, and the kid is Huey. Huey's our specialist in getting his life ruined by soupiers." "It's an honor," Mother's Milk said, nodding respectfully, though his hand remained near a heavy-caliber shotgun. "We saw the speech on the feed before the power went. Brave move. Also, incredibly stupid. You've basically put a 'kill me' sign on your back that can be seen from orbit." Diana stepped into the van, the space instantly feeling smaller under the weight of her presence. "In my world, the truth is not a target. Han, it is a shield. If Homelander wishes to strike me, he must first find the courage to face someone who does not bow. Yeah, well, in this world, he just lasers you from the stratosphere while he's having a wank." Butcher grunted, slamming the van doors shut. "Frenchie, get us out of here. Move like you've got a purpose." As the van lurched into the New York traffic, Diana sat on a crate of equipment, her eyes scanning the digital screens. She saw the immediate fallout of her speech. Social media was exploding. Vaught's stock had dipped 3 points in 10 minutes. The narrative was already being spun. Stillwell was issuing a statement claiming the Sentinel was suffering from a mental health episode caused by dimensional displacement fatigue. "They are already erasing the words," Diana observed, her voice low. "That's what they do, Diana," Huey said. leaning forward. He looked at her with a mixture of awe and pity. They don't fight you with fists. They fight you with context. By tomorrow morning, you'll be the crazy lady who went off her meds at a charity event. They'll make you a joke. A joke is harder to kill than a martyr, Butcher said, lighting a fresh cigarette despite the no smoking sign inches from his head. Which is why we're going to give them something they can't laugh off. You wanted the truth, Princess? We've got the ledger, but we need a key. Annie, Starlight, told me of a legend, Diana said. She said he knows where the bodies are buried. Butcher's eyes narrowed. The legend is a washed-up vault hack living in a basement in Jersey. He's got the stories, sure, but he's terrified of his own shadow. However, he looked at Diana's lasso. If you've got a way to make a man tell the truth even when his life depends on a lie, then maybe the old pervert might actually be useful. The van navigated the back streets of the city, avoiding the main arteries where Vaught's surveillance drones, marketed as safety watchers, hovered. Diana felt the shift in the city's energy. Away from the glitter of the Waldorf and the chrome of Vought Tower, the reality of this world was grimy and desperate. She saw the soup collateral in the eyes of the homeless, the people whose lives had been shattered by a hero's reckless intervention. "Why do you fight them?" Diana asked, looking at Mother's Milk. "You have no powers, no armor. One breath from Homelander would turn you all to ash." Mother's Milk looked at a photograph tucked into the sun visor, a young girl smiling. "Because if we don't, who will? Vought owns the government, the media, and the police. If there isn't someone willing to crawl through the sewers to bite them on the ankle, then they've already won. It's not about winning, Princess. It's about making them realize they aren't safe." "Spoken like an Amazon," Diana said softly. They arrived at a dilapidated basement apartment in a part of New Jersey that smelled of salt and industrial waste. The legend was a man who looked like a discarded pile of laundry with a cigar clamped between his teeth. His walls were lined with thousands of comic books, movie posters, and internal Vought memos dating back to the 1940s. When Diana entered the room, the legend dropped his cigar. "Holy, mother of..." "You're her, the real deal. I thought Stillwell was just doing a Xena reboot with better casting." "I am Diana," she said, her voice echoing in the cramped, paper-filled space. "And you are the man who keeps the secrets of this world." "I keep the secrets because they pay for my scotch, sweetheart," the legend rasped, his eyes darting to Butcher. "Billy, what the hell are you doing bringing a nuke into my basement? If Homelander finds out she's here, he'll turn this whole zip code into a parking lot." "He's already trying to do that, mate," Butcher said, pushing a stack of A-Train comics off a chair and sitting down. "The lady wants to see the real files. Not the PR horse shit. The Compound V distribution logs. The failed experiments. The ones where the kids didn't turn into superstars, but into meat." The legend shook his head, his hands trembling. "I can't. They'll kill me. There are protocols. Level 7 encryption, physical fail-safes." Diana didn't wait for him to finish. She uncoiled the lasso of truth. The golden rope didn't just glow. It seemed to sing, a high-pitched celestial hum that cut through the stale air of the basement. With a flick of her wrist, she sent it snaking across the room. It looped around the legend's waist with the gentleness of a silk ribbon. The man's eyes glazed over. His shivering stopped. The mask of the cynical, terrified old man fell away, leaving only a raw, naked honesty. "Tell me," Diana commanded, her voice vibrating with divine authority. "Where is the evidence of Vaught's greatest crime?" The legend's voice came out in a monotone, devoid of his usual snark. "Section 4, Floor 12 of the old lab in Pennsylvania. Belane. It's not just logs. It's the source. They're still trying to stabilize the V-24, temporary Compound V, but the original files, the ones from the 40s, they're in a cold storage vault behind the server room. It's called the Nursery." "The Nursery?" Huey asked, his voice cracking. Why is it called that? Because that's where they kept the first ones, the legend replied, a single tear tracking through the grime on his cheek. The ones that didn't have skins, the ones that had eyes where their mouths should be. They didn't kill them. Vought never throws anything away. They just archive them. Diana felt a cold, sharp blade of grief pierce her heart. To her, life was a gift from the earth itself. To these people, it was a biological accident to be filed and forgotten. She retracted the lasso, and the legend slumped forward, gasping for air as if he had just been underwater. You shouldn't have done that, the legend wheezed. Now I remember why I drink. Some things aren't meant to be true. Everything is meant to be true, Diana said, turning to Butcher. We go to this nursery. We find this evidence. Whoa, slow down, Mother's Milk said, checking his watch. The lane is a fortress. It's where they train the G-men. It's crawling with adolescent soups with zero impulse control and Vought security that shoots first and asks legal later. We can't just stroll in. I can, Diana said, and I will. But I will not go as the Sentinel. I will go as the Princess of Themyscira. I will show them what a real warrior looks like. Wait, Huey said, looking at a monitor that had been silent until now. Something's happening at the tower. Look. He flipped the audio on. It was a leaked internal feed from Vought Tower's common area. Homelander was there, but he wasn't screaming. He was standing in front of the massive gold-leafed statue of himself, his hands behind his back. Beside him stood Queen Maeve, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. Citizens. Homelander's voice was calm, which Butcher knew was infinitely more dangerous than when he was angry. We are saddened by the recent behavior of our newest guest. Diana is unwell. She has been talking to dangerous radicals, terrorists who want to take away the safety we provide. For her own protection and yours, we have issued a warrant for her detention. Anyone seen aiding her will be considered an enemy of the state. He looked directly into the camera lens as if he could see Diana through the screen. Diana, come home? Don't make me come and find you, because if I have to come find you, I might forget to be the nice guy for a minute, and New York is such a pretty city. It would be a shame if something happened to it. He's threatening the whole city, Huey whispered. He's using 8 million people as leverage. Then we have to move fast, Diana said. She looked at Butcher. You have your van, I have the sky. I will draw their attention to Belaine. I will be the storm, you follow in the wake and gather the truth. Butcher looked at her, a strange glint in his eye. It was almost respect. You're going to be the distraction. You're going to take on a whole facility of soups while we play I Spy with the filing cabinets. I'm an Amazon, Diana said, her voice rising with the strength of her ancestors. I was born to stand against the tide. Let them come. Let them see what happens when they try to cage a goddess. She stepped out of the basement and into the cool Jersey night. She didn't look back. With a sudden, explosive burst of speed, she took to the sky, a streak of bronze and gold cutting through the smog. High above the Atlantic, Diana felt the wind whipping past her face. For the first time since she arrived in this world, she felt at peace. The diplomacy was over. The theater was over. Now there was only the mission. She saw the lights of the Belan facility in the distance, a sprawling complex surrounded by electrified fences and automated turret towers. To anyone else, it was an impregnable bastion. To Diana, it was a challenge. As she descended, the facility's sirens began to wail. Surface-to-air missiles launched from hidden silos, their heat-seeking sensors locking onto her divine signature. Diana didn't dodge. She drew her sword. With a series of precise, blurring movements, she sliced the first 2 missiles in half in midair, the explosions framing her like a vengeful sun. She landed in the center of the courtyard, the impact shattering the concrete and sending a shockwave that knocked the surrounding guards off their feet. I am Diana of Themyscira, she shouted, the sound echoing through the facility like a clarion call. I have come for the children you have stolen. I have come for the truth you have buried. Send out your heroes. Let us see if they are ready for a real war." From the main doors of the facility, a dozen young soupiers emerged, the G-Men's primary team. They were teenagers, and their eyes glowing with power and arrogance, their bodies warped by Compound V. They looked at Diana not with respect, but with the hunger of predators who had been told they were the apex. "Get her!" the leader, a boy with skin like shifting obsidian, screamed. Diana didn't move. She waited until they were almost upon her. Then, she slammed her braces together. The resulting shockwave didn't just knock them back, it blew out every window in the facility and deactivated the electronic locks for 5 miles. "Step 1 complete," Diana whispered, looking up as Butcher's van barreled through the front gates. "Now let us see what secrets are kept in the dark." The air in the Belial courtyard was a thick soup of dust, pulverized concrete, and the ozone of shattered electronics. Diana stood amidst the wreckage of her own entrance, the bronze of her breastplate gleaming with a dull, ancient fire. The G-Men were not warriors. They were a collective of traumatized, overpowered adolescents who had been conditioned to believe their powers were a substitute for character. As they scrambled back to their feet, their eyes weren't filled with the tactical calculation of a soldier. They were wide with the panicked confusion of a bully who had just been struck back for the very first time. "You're not supposed to be here!" the boy with the obsidian skin shrieked. His body rippled, his mass expanding until he stood 10 feet tall, a jagged monolith of living stone. "This is Vought property!" "Sis, we're the heroes. We're the good guys," he charged, his footfalls cracking the pavement. Diana didn't draw her sword. To use the God Killer on a child, even one as corrupted as this, was beneath her. She waited until the last possible microsecond, then stepped into his guard. With a fluid redirection of his own momentum that would have made a master of Aikido weep, she caught his wrist and sent him tumbling through a reinforced concrete pillar. "A hero does not claim the title with words, child," Diana said, her voice cutting through the roar of the facility's secondary sirens. "A hero is forged in the service of others. You are merely a weapon with a name." 2 other teenagers, a girl with hair made of flickering plasma and a boy whose eyes leaked a corrosive black sludge, launched a dual assault. The plasma girl unleashed a concentrated stream of white-hot energy, while the boy projected a wave of the acidic rot toward Diana's feet. Diana crossed her braces, the Amazonian silver absorbing the heat and reflecting the acid with a localized kinetic burst. She moved like a blur, a streak of gold and red, tapping the pressure points on the plasma girl's neck to render her unconscious before she could melt her own nervous system. Behind her, the white van skidded to a halt. Butcher, Mother's Milk, and Frenchie piled out, armed with specialized suppression gear and tactical rifles loaded with holothane rounds. Huey stayed in the van, his fingers flying across a stolen Vought laptop as he fought to keep the facility's internal security from rebooting. "Nice work with the welcoming committee, Princess," Butcher shouted over the din, and firing a burst of non-lethal rounds at a security team emerging from the West Wing. "Milk, Frenchie, get the breaching charges on the elevator shaft. We need to get down to the basement before Homelander decides to drop by for a chat." "I will hold the perimeter," Diana said, her eyes scanning the rooftops. She could hear more heartbeats, hundreds of them inside the building. The facility wasn't just a lab, it was a dormitory. "Butcher, if you find the children, if they are as the legend described, bring them to the light. Do not leave them in the dark. Don't worry, love. I've got a real soft spot for orphans," Butcher lied, his eyes already focused on the carnage ahead. As the boys disappeared into the smoke-filled lobby, Diana turned back to the remaining G-Men. More were pouring out now, a girl who could manipulate gravity, and a boy who moved like a liquid shadow, and several others with physical mutations that made them look more like the monsters of Greek myth than the stars of a comic book. "Please," Diana said, holding out a hand in a gesture of peace. "You do not have to do this. Vought has lied to you. They have turned your gifts into a cage. Step aside and let us reveal the truth of what they have done to you." "Liar!" a girl with telekinetic abilities screamed, lifting a nearby security vehicle and hurling it at Diana. "Vought is our family. Godolkin is our father." Diana caught the car with one hand, the metal groaning under the force of her grip, and set it down gently. She felt a profound wave of pity. This was the true horror of Vought, the systematic eradication of the self. They didn't just manufacture power, they manufactured loyalty through trauma. For the next 10 minutes, Diana engaged in a masterclass of defensive combat. She moved through the G-men like a ghost, disabling them with surgical precision, using the flat of her blade or the strength of her hands to incapacitate without killing. She was a whirlwind of motion, her golden lasso catching those who tried to flee or flank her, forcing them into a brief, terrifying moment of self-reflection that left them weeping and broken on the ground. Inside the facility, the atmosphere was vastly different. Butcher and his crew were moving through a labyrinth of clinical horror. The walls were a pristine, sterile white, but the scent of chemical rot and ancient blood was inescapable. "Frenchie, how are we doing on that door?" Mother's Milk asked, his shotgun leveled at a dark hallway. "It is not a door, mon ami. It is a work of art," Frenchie muttered, his hands shaking as he bypassed a biometrically locked vault. Vought uses a triple redundancy encryption based on the DNA of the original subjects. If I make one mistake, we are all turned into a very expensive fondue. "Just open the bloody thing," Butcher growled. The vault door hissed open with a release of pressurized nitrogen. As the mist cleared, even Butcher, a man who had seen the worst the world had to offer, went silent. The room was filled with glass cylinders, each containing a biological nightmare. These weren't the polished, marketable soups of the Seven. These were the failures. A child with wings made of exposed bone. A boy whose skin was transparent, revealing a frantic, oversized heart. And in the center, a large terminal labeled Project 4, the Nursery. "This is it," Huey's voice crackled over the comms, sounding as if he were about to vomit. "I'm in the server. I'm pulling the logs. Butcher, it's not just Compound V. They were trying to build a god before they found Homelander. They used the records from the Apostle." "The Apostle?" Butcher whispered. "Who the hell is the Apostle?" "I don't know, but the dates, they go back to the 40s. "Germany," Huey replied. "Butcher, get out of there. I'm seeing a massive power surge on the radar. Something is coming, something fast." Outside, Diana felt the change in the wind before she heard the sonic boom. The sky over Belena turned a bruised, angry purple. A single figure descended from the clouds, but it wasn't Homelander. It was Stormfront, as she landed with a crack of lightning that charred the ground. Her black suit and Nazi-inspired regalia, a sharp contrast to the blue and red idealism of the Seven. Her eyes crackled with electrical discharge, and a cruel, knowing smirk played across her lips. "So, you're the goddess everyone's talking about," Stormfront said, her voice dripping with a casual, white supremacist arrogance. "I've seen your stats. Very impressive. Pure. Untainted. You're exactly what this world needs. Someone who understands that the strong were meant to rule the weak." Diana stepped forward, her sword finally drawn. The god killer hummed, its edge reflecting the lightning dancing in Stormfront's hands. "I have fought your kind before, many times across the centuries. You call yourselves superior, but you are merely the latest iteration of an old, tired disease." "Oh, honey," Stormfront laughed, hovering a foot off the ground as the air around her began to ionize. "You're thousands of years old. That's cute. But I was there when the modern world was born. I'm the blueprint, and you? You're just a copyright infringement." Stormfront unleashed a massive arc of purple lightning. Diana didn't block it with her braces this time. She swung her sword, the divine metal slicing through the electrical current as if it were a physical thread. She lunged forward, her speed surprising even Stormfront. The two collided in a burst of kinetic energy that leveled the nearby guard towers. As they fought, a clash of ancient myth and modern monstrosity, the facility began to shake. Deep in the nursery, the files were being copied, but a secondary protocol had been triggered, and a countdown appeared on every screen in the building. "Butcher!" Diana's voice echoed through the comms. "The facility is rigged to blow. Take the data and the children. I will handle the lightning bringer." "We're moving," Butcher shouted back. "But the kids, Diana, some of them can't move. They're hooked up to life support." "Then carry them," Diana roared, her fist connecting with Stormfront's jaw with the force of a falling star. Stormfront recoiled, her face contorting in a mask of rage. "You care about these Untermenschen, these genetic mistakes? Let them burn. It'll save Vought the cleanup costs." She clapped her hands together, creating a localized EMP that fried the boys' comms and plunged the facility into darkness. In the blackness of the nursery, Butcher looked at the transparent boy in the tank. The boy's eyes met his. "Ah, I hate soups," Butcher whispered, his hand trembling as he reached for the release valve. "But I hate Vought more." In the courtyard, Diana and Stormfront were a blur of violet light and bronze fire. Stormfront was faster in the air, but Diana was the superior combatant in every sense of the word. She used her lasso to snag Stormfront's ankle, swinging her through the facility's main radar dish before slamming her into the ground. "You speak of purity," Diana said, standing over the dazed Soupy. "But your soul is a swamp of filth. There is no glory in your strength, only the stench of the grave." Stormfront spat a mouthful of blue-tinged blood. "You think you've won? Homelander is on his way, and he doesn't care about truth. He just wants his toys back." The countdown reached 0. The ground beneath Bellani heaved. A series of massive, subterranean explosions tore through the foundations of the facility. Diana looked toward the main doors, praying to Athena that the boys had made it out. Through the smoke and fire, she saw the white van burst through a side wall, airborne for a moment before slamming onto the grass. Mother's Milk was driving, his face covered in soot. In the back, she could see Butcher and Frenchie huddled over several small shivering forms, wrapped in thermal blankets. They had saved some. Not all, but some. Stormfront used the distraction to blast herself into the sky, disappearing into the clouds with a trail of hateful lightning. Diana didn't pursue. She turned to the van, her heart heavy with the weight of the lives still trapped inside the collapsing building. "Go!" Diana commanded, pointing toward the tree line. "Ma, get them to the Legend's safe house. I will cover your retreat." "What about you?" Huey cried out from the passenger seat. Diana looked up. High above, a single red star was growing brighter. Homelander was coming, and he wasn't alone. The remaining members of the Seven, those still loyal or too terrified to leave, were flanking him. "I will show them that a goddess does not bleed for herself," Diana said, her voice a calm, steady anchor in the chaos. "She bleeds for the world. Now move." The van sped away into the night. Diana stood alone in the burning ruins of Belaine. She sheathed her sword and uncoiled her lasso, the golden light casting a long, defiant shadow across the scorched earth. She looked up at the descending gods of Vought. Her armor was cracked, her skin was stained with soot, and she was thousands of miles from the home she loved. But as she felt the steady, ancient beat of her heart, as she knew that she had already won the most important battle. She had shown the world that Vought could be heard. She had shown them that the truth was not just a word, it was a revolution. Homelander landed 20 feet away, his cape fluttering in the heat of the fires. He didn't look at the ruins. He didn't look at the dead G-men. He looked only at Diana, his eyes glowing with a red heat that rivaled the sun. "You broke my things, Diana," he said, his voice a terrifying, quiet whisper. And now, I'm going to break everything you ever cared about." Diana raised her chin, her eyes burning with a light that no lab could ever replicate. "You can try, John, but the dawn is coming, and you are a creature of the dark. The fires of the Belaine facility cast a hellish, flickering orange light over the ruins, turning the smoke into a thick, choking veil that draped over the battlefield." Diana stood in the epicenter of the destruction, her bronze sandals planted firmly in the scorched earth. 20 feet away, Homelander drifted a few inches above the ground, the heat from his body causing the air to shimmer. Behind him, the remaining members of the Seven, A-Train the Deep and a visibly shaken Queen Maeve, formed a jagged semicircle. They were the elite, the gods of the modern era, but in the presence of the burning wreckage and the silent, unyielding Amazon, they looked like children playing dress-up in a graveyard. "Do you hear that, Diana?" Homelander asked, his voice eerily calm, devoid of its usual theatrical projection. He tilted his head, as if listening to a distant melody. "That's the sound of the world's most expensive PR nightmare. That's the sound of Madeline Stillwell having a stroke, and it's all because you couldn't just sit still and look pretty for the cameras." "The sound you hear is the crumbling of a facade," Diana replied, her hand resting on the hilt of the god killer. "You call this a nightmare because you fear the light of day. To the children Butcher just carried out of that furnace, this is the beginning of a dream." Homelander's jaw tightened. The mention of Butcher, a mere mortal who had dared to touch Vought property, was a needle under his skin. "Butcher is a parasite, and you're a virus. You came into my world, you sat at my table, and you thought you could judge me." He began to laugh, a dry, hollow sound that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm the one who decides what's right. I'm the one who keeps the peace. Without me, this whole country is just a bunch of monkeys killing each other for the last banana." "You do not keep the peace, John. You keep the silence," Diana said. She stepped forward, the weight of her presence forcing A-Train and the Deep to take an involuntary step back. "You have mistaken fear for respect and power for authority. A true leader does not need to threaten a city to be heard." "Enough!" Homelander screamed, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. He didn't fly, he lunged, a blur of red, white, and blue. Diana met him halfway. The collision of their two forms created a shockwave that flattened the remaining charred trees around the courtyard. Homelander's strength was raw, unrefined, and fueled by a lifetime of unchecked narcissism. Diana's strength was disciplined, ancient, and channeled through centuries of Amazonian combat theory. He swung a haymaker that could have decapitated a titan. She parried it with her bracer, the impact ringing out like a bell. As they traded blows, the air around them became a vacuum of kinetic energy. Homelander was used to opponents who broke upon contact, men who turned to red mist or soups whose bones shattered like glass. But every time his fist connected with Diana's shield or armor, he felt a resistance he couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just physical density. It was as if he were trying to punch the concept of the Earth itself. "A train! Move!" Homelander barked during a momentary clinch. The speedster didn't need to be told twice. He saw his opening. To A-Train, the world was a frozen tableau, and Diana was a stationary target. But he accelerated to Mach 3, his plan simple, a high-velocity impact to her kidneys to knock her off balance so Homelander could finish her. He was a blur of blue light, a kinetic bullet aimed at the Amazon's spine. Diana didn't turn around. She didn't have to. She felt the displacement of air, the vibration in the ground that preceded the speedster. At the last possible millisecond, she uncoiled the Lasso of Truth with a blind flick of her wrist. The golden rope didn't just catch A-Train, it predicted him. It snaked through the air with a divine intelligence, looping around his ankle just as he entered her personal space. The sudden deceleration was violent. The train's own momentum became his enemy as the lasso held firm, anchored by Diana's godlike strength. He was swung in a wide, punishing arc, his body skipping across the concrete like a stone on water before slamming into the base of a collapsed cooling tower. Your speed is a gift you have squandered on errands for cowards, Diana said, her eyes never leaving Homelander. Homelander's eyes flared red. He unleashed a sustained burst of heat vision, the twin beams of crimson light carving a furrow in the earth as he swept them toward Diana. She crossed her bracers, the silver metal glowing white-hot as she absorbed the brunt of the assault. She could feel the heat. It was more intense than the fires of Hephaestus. But she didn't yield. She began to walk forward, leaning into the stream of energy, her boots digging into the melted asphalt. "Is that all?" she challenged, her voice strained but steady. "I'll burn your eyes out of your skull." Homelander roared, increasing the intensity. From the periphery, the Deep tried to intervene, lunging forward with a harpoon-like spear he'd scavenged from the facility's security cache. "For Vought!" he cried, his voice cracking with desperation. Queen Maeve moved faster. She intercepted the Deep mid-charge, her shoulders slamming into his chest and sending him sprawling. "Stay down, Kevin," she hissed, her eyes fixed on the spectacle in the center of the yard. "You're out of your league. We all are." Diana reached the source of the heat vision. With a primal shout, she threw her arms outward, the kinetic discharge of her bracers shattering Homelander's concentration and sending him tumbling back into the ruins of the main laboratory. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the crackle of burning wires. Diana stood in the clearing, and her chest heaving, her armor blackened and cracked. She looked at Maeve. The two women shared a silent moment, one of recognition and one of mourning. Maeve saw in Diana the hero she was supposed to be, and Diana saw in Maeve the tragedy of a soul that had been bartered away for comfort. "Go, Maeve," Diana said softly. "Take the others and leave this place. There is no victory for Vought here tonight." Maeve looked at the rubble where Homelander had fallen, then back at Diana. "He won't stop. You know that, right? He'll follow you to the ends of the earth. He'll kill everyone you've ever spoken to just to see you cry. Then I shall be the last thing he ever sees," Diana replied. A low, guttural growl rose from the wreckage of the lab. The debris began to vibrate, then exploded outward as Homelander rose from the dust. He wasn't smiling anymore. His cape was torn, his suit was shredded, and a single trickle of dark, bruised blood ran from his nose, the first time he had ever bled in his adult life. He looked at the blood on his fingers with a mixture of horror and ecstatic realization. You actually did it. You made me bleed." He looked up, and his expression was no longer human. It was the face of a god who had discovered the joy of the kill. "I was going to keep you as a trophy, Diana. A little pet for the Seven. But now I'm going to see what your heart looks like. I'm going to show this world that even a goddess can be turned into meat." Before he could launch his final assault, a series of high-intensity flares ignited in the sky, illuminating the entire area in a sterile, white light. A fleet of Vought gunships appeared on the horizon, nose their heavy cannons swiveling toward the courtyard. "Homelander, stand down!" Madeline Stillwell's voice boomed over a long-range voxcaster from the lead ship. "The situation is being contained. We have a narrative to salvage. Do not kill the asset." Homelander looked at the ships, then at Diana. For a second, the corporate conditioning struggled against his burgeoning bloodlust. He let out a snarl, his eyes glowing one last time before he took flight, disappearing into the clouds with a sonic boom that shattered the remaining windows in the district. The gunships didn't fire. They hovered, a silent, mechanical threat. Diana stood her ground, her sword ready, but she knew the Battle of Bellany was over. The boys were gone, the data was secure, and the truth was a ticking time bomb in Butcher's pocket. She looked at the burning ruins one last time. She hadn't found a way home, but as she watched the Vought ships begin their cleanup operation, a polite term for erasing the evidence of the dead G-men, she realized she was exactly where she needed to be. The 21st century didn't need a diplomat. It needed an executioner for its false idols. She turned and began to walk into the darkness of the surrounding woods, her bronze armor disappearing into the shadows. Behind her, the sirens of New Jersey wailed in the distance, a mourning song for a world that was about to wake up to a very different reality. The sanctuary of the Legend's basement was no longer a tomb of dusty memorabilia. It had become a command center for a brewing revolution. The air was thick with the smell of copper, antiseptic, and the cheap, burnt coffee that Mother's milk used to keep his hands from shaking. In the corner, the 3 children rescued from the nursery sat on a pile of yellowed Homelander comics, their eyes hollow and staring. The transparent boy's heart rhythm had slowed, a soft, bioluminescent thrum that acted as a metronome for the grim work being done at the central table. Diana stood by the door, a silent sentinel in the dim light. She had washed the soot from her face, but her armor remained scarred, the bronze pockmarked by the searing heat of Homelander's rage. She watched Butcher. The man was hunched over a series of physical dossiers they had pulled from Belaine, his fingers stained black by 70-year-old ink. "It's not just a drug, Diana," Butcher said, his voice a low, jagged rasp. He tossed a grainy black-and-white photograph onto the table. It showed a man in a lab coat standing next to a familiar caped figure in a jagged, primitive version of the Vought uniform. Compound Phi wasn't an American invention, it was a defection. Frederick Vought wasn't just a scientist, he was the chief physician at Dachau. He didn't build heroes to save the world, he built them to purify it. Huey looked up from his laptop, his face pale in the screen's glow. "The data I pulled? It's worse than the Legend said. Vought didn't just archive the failures. They've been using them as biological processes. No, they've been harvesting genetic material from the unstable subjects to refine the V-24, the temporary stuff they want to sell to the military." He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "They aren't trying to make people better. They're trying to make humanity obsolete." "A philosophy of the void," Diana said, her voice resonant in the small space. "They seek to replace the divine spark of effort with the cold certainty of a formula. It is the ultimate hubris." "It's the ultimate business model, love," Butcher countered, standing up and stretching his back. "If you can sell a man the power of a god in a syringe, you don't just own his loyalty, you own his soul. And right now, Vought is about to go global. They're pushing for a bill in the Senate that would allow soups into the military hierarchy. If that passes, Homelander doesn't just have a fan club, he has an army." The door to the basement creaked open. Everyone froze. Mother's milk leveled his shotgun, and Diana's hand blurred to the hilt of her sword. But it wasn't a Vought tactical team, it was Annie January. She was still in her Starlight uniform, but the white fabric was stained with gray slush, and her cape was missing. "They're looking for you," Annie panted, closing the door and leaning against it. "Everywhere. Homelander he's gone off the rails. He's not even pretending anymore. He killed 2 of the floor security guards because they didn't clear the elevator fast enough. Stillwell is trying to spin it as a security breach, but the staff is terrified." "Good," Butcher grunted. "Let the blonde cunt sweat. Did you get the access codes for the server farm in the tower?" Annie looked at Diana, her eyes searching for a shred of the hope she had felt in the penthouse. "I got them. But you don't understand. They've moved the legendary files. They knew someone was digging. They've moved everything to a localized drive in Homelander's private suite. If we want the proof that links Vought to the Nazi programs, the proof that will actually destroy the brand, we have to go through him." "Then we go through him," Diana said simply. "It's a suicide mission," Huey cried, standing up so fast his chair flipped over. "Diana, he's waiting for you. He's turned the top 5 floors of that building into a kill box. The moment you fly into that airspace, they'll hit you with everything they've got." "Which is why I will not fly," Diana replied. She looked at Butcher. "You spoke of shadows, you spoke of the dirt. I've spent my life in the sun, but I was trained by the Amazons to move through the dark as well. We will enter the tower from below. We will strike at the roots of the tree. The sewers? The deep would have been right at home, but for us, it's a 3-mile hike through Vaught's waste management system, Frenchie noted, rubbing his chin. But if we can bypass the biometric scanners at the sub-level. I can short them out, Annie said, her jaw setting with a newfound resolve. I can draw enough power from the city's grid to blow the internal fuses of the tower's security hub. It'll give us a 5-minute window before the backups kick in. The plan was a desperate, jagged thing, and born of necessity and tempered by the realization that Vought was no longer playing by the rules of optics. They were moving into the endgame. As the boys began to pack their gear, specialized explosives, zinc-lined bags for the data drives, and heavy weaponry, Diana pulled Annie aside. "You're risking everything, Annie January," Diana said softly. "The world you knew is gone. If we fail, there will be no place for you to hide." "The world I knew was a lie, Diana," Annie replied, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "I'd rather be a fugitive than a puppet. Besides, I want to see his face when he realizes he's not the most important thing in the room." The journey through the New York sewer system was a descent into the city's subconscious. The air was a thick, humid rot, as in the walls were slick with an oily residue that smelled faintly of Compound V, the runoff from 1,000 heroic accidents. Diana led the way, her divine senses cutting through the gloom. She could hear the pulse of the city above them, the frantic electric hum of Vought Tower growing louder with every step. They reached the sub-level junction, a massive vault of reinforced steel that served as the tower's foundation. Annie stepped forward, her hands beginning to glow with a brilliant, white-hot intensity. She reached for the primary power conduit, her body arching as she became a conduit for the city's lifeblood. Crack. The darkness was absolute for a heartbeat, followed by the red, strobing glow of the emergency lights. "Go!" Annie hissed, her voice strained. They moved through the maintenance tunnels, to ascending the service stairs with a silent, practiced efficiency. Diana felt the shift in the atmosphere as they crossed the threshold into the tower proper. The air grew colder, more sterile. They were in the guts of the beast now. They reached the 99th floor, not through the grand elevators, but through a vertical ventilation shaft. Diana was the first to emerge, her boots landing silently on the marble floor of the executive corridor. The silence was deafening. The frantic activity of the lower floors hadn't reached this high. Here, there were no assistants, no PR teams. There was only the sound of a single, rhythmic thrumming coming from behind the double doors of Homelander's suite. It was the sound of a heart beating, slow, steady, predatory. "Stay back," Diana whispered to the boys. "This is not a battle for mortals." She pushed the doors open. The suite was vast, a glass-walled palace looking out over the flickering lights of Manhattan. Homelander was standing by the window, his back to her. He wasn't wearing his cape. He was staring at his own reflection, his fingers tracing a long, jagged scar on his chest, the mark where Diana had struck him at Belaine. "I knew you'd come the back way," Homelander said, his voice a soft, conversational purr. "Butcher likes the dirt. It suits him. But you, I thought you were a princess. I thought you liked the high ground." "I am where I need to be, John," Diana said, her hand moving to the lasso. "The high ground is where the truth stands, and right now, it is looking down on you." Homelander turned around. His eyes were bloodshot, and his smile was a jagged, broken thing. And on the table behind him sat the localized drive, the Apostle files. "You want this?" he asked, pointing at the drive. "You want to tell the world that Daddy was a Nazi? You think they'll care?" "People don't want the truth, Diana. They want to be safe. They want to believe that someone like me is watching over them so they don't have to look into the dark." "They want to believe in a hero," Diana corrected, "and I'm going to show them that you are just a man who is afraid of being small." Homelander didn't fly. He didn't use his heat vision. he simply walked toward her, his presence filling the room like a gathering storm. "I'm not afraid of anything anymore, Diana, because I realized something after you hit me. I realized that if you can bleed, you can die. And if a goddess can die, then I really am the only one left." Outside, the first tendrils of dawn began to creep over the horizon, casting long, pale shadows across the room. The confrontation that would decide the fate of the 21st century was no longer a PR stunt. It was a clash of fundamental truths. And as Diana uncoiled the golden rope, she knew that only one of them would walk out of the light. The air in the penthouse was thick with the scent of ozone and the heavy, cloying smell of Homelander's expensive cologne, a scent that now felt like a funeral shroud. The sun was a sliver of bruised gold on the horizon, bleeding light into the room, reflecting off the glass and chrome until the entire suite felt like the interior of a diamond. Diana and Homelander stood in the center of this crystalline cage, two beings of impossible power caught in a moment of absolute stillness before the strike. "You speak of the truth as if it's a living thing," Homelander said, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more menace than a shout. "But I've lived in the guts of Vought since I was a fetus in a tube, Diana. I've seen what the truth does. It's just a weapon. And in this world, is whoever has the biggest gun gets to decide what's true." "A gun can only kill, John," Diana replied, her fingers tightening on the lasso. "The truth changes. It is the difference between a prison and a path. You have lived in a prison of your own, making for so long you have forgotten that the doors were never actually locked. You chose this. You chose the lie because it made you feel like a god." Homelander's face contorted, the muscles in his neck standing out like cords of iron. "I didn't choose anything. I was made. I was designed to be perfect. And then you show up with your bronze and your honor, and you make me look ordinary." With a roar that shattered the floor-to-ceiling windows, Homelander lunged. The battle was unlike their clash at Boulogne. There they had been testing boundaries. Here, in the heart of Vought, it was an execution. Homelander fought with a feral, undisciplined rage, his blows aimed at Diana's throat, her eyes, her heart. He was a whirlwind of blue and red, using his flight to create angles of attack that would have disoriented any mortal warrior. He slammed her into the marble pillars, the stone disintegrating into powder upon impact. He used his heat vision in short, jagged bursts, trying to find a gap in her defense. Diana was a study in controlled, divine motion. She didn't waste a single movement. Every parry was a setup, every dodge was a redirection. She used the environment against him, snagging his cape with her lasso and swinging him through his own Vanity Project statues. When he tried to pin her against the wall, she used her knees and elbows with the surgical precision of an Amazonian master, striking the clusters of nerves that even Compound Vi couldn't fully harden. "You're fast," Homelander wheezed, his suit now a tattered wreck. "But I don't get tired. I've got a reactor in my chest, sweetheart. How long can your divine blood keep your heart pumping?" "As long as there is an innocent soul to protect," Diana said, her voice a calm anchor in the chaos. Behind a reinforced equipment rack, Butcher and the boys were moving toward the central console. The room was shaking with the force of the two titans clashing, dust and glass falling like snow. "Frenchie, get the drive," Butcher shouted over the roar of a sonic boom. "I'm trying, Mon Capitaine, but the encryption is physical. I need 10 seconds without the room trying to turn into a pancake." Frenchie's hands were a blur as he manipulated the localized drive. The Homelander heard them. His head snapped toward the shadows where the mortals hid. A cruel, ecstatic grin spread across his face. "Oh, I forgot. Your little pets. Let's see how they handle a bit of divine intervention." He didn't fly toward them. He inhaled, his chest expanding to a grotesque size, and let out a supersonic scream. The wall of sound hit the room like a physical shock wave. The heavy oak desk was pulverized instantly. The equipment rack was twisted into scrap metal. Mother's Milk and Huey were thrown backward, their ears bleeding, their bodies hitting the far wall with sickening thuds. "No!" Diana cried. She lunged forward, her lasso snaking through the air, but Homelander was waiting. He caught the rope with his bare hand. The golden light flared, a brilliant, blinding sizzle as the lasso reacted to the density of his lies. It burned his palm, the scent of searing flesh filling the air, but he didn't let go. He pulled. For a moment, they were locked in a tug-of-war of the gods. The floor beneath them buckled, the structural steel of the tower groaning under the lateral strain. "You want the truth?" Homelander hissed, his eyes inches from hers, glowing a deep, malevolent violet. "The truth is that you're just as much of a freak as I am. You don't belong here. You're just a ghost from a storybook that someone forgot to close." "The story is just beginning," Diana whispered. She didn't pull back. She let go of the lasso and stepped into his space. Before he could react to the sudden lack of resistance, she slammed her bracers together directly in front of his face. No, the resulting kinetic explosion was the loudest sound ever heard in Manhattan. The entire top floor of Vought Tower was effectively gutted. The ceiling was blown into the sky, exposing the room to the morning air. Homelander was launched like a projectile, crashing through 7 floors of the secondary wing before coming to a halt in the corporate archives. Diana didn't wait. She turned to the boys. Butcher was already on his feet, spitting blood, his hand gripping the localized drive. Mother's Milk was dragging a dazed Huey toward the ventilation shaft. "Go," Diana commanded. "Get the data to the broadcast hub. Annie is waiting at the relay station." "What about you?" Butcher asked, his eyes hovering on the massive hole in the floor where Homelander had disappeared. "I have to finish this," Diana said. "If he survives this morning, and he will burn the world to find you, I will keep him here." Butcher looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the cracks in her armor, the blood on her brow, and the absolute, terrifying clarity in her eyes. He didn't say thank you. He didn't offer a salute. He simply nodded and disappeared into the shadows of the ruined hallway. Diana stood alone on the precipice of the 99th floor. The wind whipped her hair, the cold morning air stinging her skin. Below her, she could hear the city waking up, the sirens, the distant roar of traffic, the sounds of millions of people who had no idea that their god was currently bleeding in a pile of filing cabinets. The floor beneath her feet began to vibrate, a low, rhythmic thumping, like a giant's heartbeat. Homelander rose through the wreckage. He wasn't flying, he was climbing, his fingers tearing through the steel and concrete as if it were wet cardboard. He emerged from the hole, his suit almost entirely gone, his skin covered in a layer of gray dust and his own dark blood. He looked less like a man and more like a gargoyle carved from hate. "That was a mistake," Homelander said, his voice cracking. "You should have killed me when you had the chance, because now I'm not playing hero anymore." He looked out at the city, at the morning sun hitting the skyscrapers. "You want to show them the truth? Fine. Let's give them something they'll never forget. Let's show them what happens when their protector decides he's done protecting." He turned his eyes toward the horizon, toward the residential districts of Queens and Brooklyn. His eyes began to glow, not with the focused beams of his usual heat vision, but with an unstable, flickering radiance. "I can level a dozen blocks in a single pass," he said, a horrific, childlike wonder in his voice. "Thousands of them, Diana, all because you wanted to play truth or dare with Vought." Diana realized then that she couldn't win this with strength alone. Homelander had reached the point of total ego death. He was no longer a man. He was a weapon that had decided to detonate it. She reached for her lasso, which lay coiled on the floor between them. "John, look at me." "No," he snarled. "I'm done looking at you." "Look at the light," Diana said, her voice dropping to a low, melodic hum. "You have never seen it, have you? The true light of the world, not the stage lights, not the flashbulbs. The light that exists when the ego is gone. She threw the lasso. It didn't loop around his waist or his neck. Once it looped around his eyes. Homelander screamed, a sound of pure, existential agony. The lasso didn't burn his skin this time. It burned his mind. It forced the entirety of his own repressed humanity, every ounce of the trauma, the loneliness, and the absolute horror of his own actions, back into his consciousness all at once. For the first time in his life, Homelander wasn't looking at the world. He was looking at himself. He collapsed to his knees, his hands clawing at the rope. The violet glow in his eyes faded, replaced by a dull, flickering blue. He began to weep, not the theatrical sobs of a manipulative narcissist, but the raw, ugly wailing of a broken child. Diana walked toward him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. The truth is a heavy burden, John, but it is the only thing that can set you free. In that moment, and the screens across New York, the billboards, the TVs, the phones, flickered. The broadcast hub had been breached. Butcher and Annie had succeeded. The Apostle files, the Nazi origins of Vought, the footage of the nursery, and the recorded crimes of the Seven began to stream to every eye in the city. The facade of Vought International didn't just crack, it vanished. But as Diana stood over the weeping gourd, she felt a sudden, sharp spike of danger. Not from Homelander, from above. A Vought orbital strike satellite, triggered by a dead man's switch in Stillwell's office, had locked onto the 99th floor. The corporation was going to cauterize the wound. "John," Diana said, her voice urgent, "we have to go." But Homelander didn't move. He was staring at the lasso, his reflection visible in the golden light. "I'm a monster," he whispered. "I've always been a monster." "Then be a hero for the last time," Diana said, looking up at the sky. The orbital beam struck. The orbital strike did not arrive as a bolt of fire, but as a pillar of pure, coherent white light that turned the morning air into a vacuum. The sky over Manhattan hissed as the atmosphere was incinerated. In the fraction of a second before impact, Diana didn't flee for the service stairs or dive for the structural supports. She lunged for Homelander, not to strike him, but to anchor him. She threw her arms around the broken, weeping man, crossing her braces over his head, and braced her feet against the crumbling floor of the 99th floor. The beam hit with the weight of a falling mountain. The upper 5 floors of Vought Tower vanished in a localized supernova. Concrete didn't shatter, it turned to vapor. Steel didn't bend, it flowed like water. The shockwave rippled outward, shattering windows for 30 blocks and sending a pillar of ash into the stratosphere that could be seen from the coast of Connecticut. For the citizens of New York, it looked like the end of the world. For Diana, it was the ultimate test of her divine lineage. Deep within the white-hot center of the strike, Diana felt the heat clawing at her skin, the silver of her bracers glowing with a blinding celestial brilliance. She was the lightning rod for the corporation's final solution. Beneath her, Homelander was silent, his body limp as the energy washed over them. He was a creature of Vought, and now Vought was trying to erase him as if he were a typo in a press release. "Daughter of Hippolyta, stand firm," Diana roared into the light, her voice a defiant song against the roar of the orbital cannon. The beam lasted for 12 seconds, a lifetime in the heart of a sun. When the satellite finally reached its thermal limit and the pillar of light flickered out, the top of Vought Tower was gone. In its place was a jagged, smoking stump of slagged metal and fused glass, open to the cold morning sky. Diana knelt in the center of the devastation. Her armor was no longer bronze. It was a scorched, blackened gray. Her cape was ash. Her skin was marked by vivid, glowing lines where the energy had tried to find a way through her. But she was alive. She looked down at the man in her arms. Homelander was barely recognizable. The suit was gone. His skin was a map of third-degree burns, and his breathing was a wet, rattling struggle. But the lasso of truth was still looped around his wrist, its golden glow the only clean thing in the ruins. They tried to kill me, Homelander whispered, his voice a ghost of its former arrogance. He looked up at the sky, at the invisible point where the satellite had struck from. After everything, I was just a liability. You were a tool, John, Diana said, her voice heavy with a mournful compassion. And when a tool breaks, the craftsman throws it away. But you are more than what they made you. No, he wheezed, a single bloody tear tracking through the soot on his cheek. I'm nothing. I'm just a bad dream. Across the city, the silence that followed the explosion was broken not by sirens, but by a sound Vought had spent billions of dollars trying to suppress. The sound of a million voices realizing they had been lied to. On every screen that hadn't been fried by the EMP of the strike, the Apostle files were still looping. To the images of the nursery, the Nazi lineage of Compound 5, and the secret records of the Seven's atrocities were burned into the collective consciousness of the world. From the service stairwell, miraculously spared by the localized nature of the beam, a figure emerged. It was Billy Butcher. He was covered in dust, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. He held a high-caliber handgun in one hand and a radio in the other. Behind him, Queen Maeve stepped out of the shadows, her eyes wide as she surveyed the ruins of her life's work. Well, Butcher said, his voice echoing in the hollowed-out top of the tower. That's one way to renovate the office. I assume the blonde cunt is finally done? He walked toward the smoking crater where Diana and Homelander lay. He leveled the gun at Homelander's head, his finger tightening on the trigger. Wait, Diana commanded, her voice regaining its royal authority. Wait for what, princess? Butcher spat. This is the moment. This is the end of the line for the world's biggest mistake. I've waited 10 years to put a hole in that perfect, smug face. He's already dead, William, Diana said. The man you hated is gone. What remains is a soul that has finally seen its own reflection. Do not let your vengeance turn you into the very thing you sought to destroy. Butcher looked at Homelander, at the broken, weeping wreck of a man who didn't even have the strength to look up. He saw the lasso of truth glowing, and for a second, the reflection hit Butcher too. He saw his own rage, his own obsession, in the hollow void where his life used to be. He doesn't get to be a martyr, Maeve said, stepping forward. Then she looked at Homelander with a complex mixture of loathing and pity. If you kill him now, Vought will find a way to make it look like a tragic sacrifice. Let him live. Let him stand trial. Let the world see the god as he really is. Butcher lowered the gun, though the hatred in his eyes didn't dim. Trial? You think there's a court on this planet that can hold him? You think Vought won't just buy the judge? Vought is dead, Butcher. Huey's voice crackled over the radio. The SEC just froze their assets. The UN is calling for an emergency tribunal. And Madeline Stillwell, she just walked out of her office into a crowd of protesters. It's over. The brand is gone. Diana stood up, her scorched armor clanking. She looked out over the city. The sun was fully up now, illuminating the smoke and the ruins. And she felt the weight of the centuries pressing down on her. She had seen empires fall before. Rome, Greece, the dynasties of the East. They all fell the same way, under the weight of their own lies. What now? Maeve asked, standing beside her. Vought is gone, but there are still hundreds of Suppies out there. Some are scared, some are angry, and some are just as bad as he was. Then we teach them, Diana said. We show them that power is not a right, but a responsibility. We rebuild, not with Compound V, but with the truth. Sounds like a lot of work, Butcher grunted, lighting a cigarette he'd somehow kept dry. I think I'll stick to the shadows if it's all the same to you. Someone's got to keep an eye on the teachers. I would expect nothing less, Diana smiled. But the peace was short-lived. From the distance, the sound of rotors approached. Not Vought, but the United States military. Black Hawk helicopters crested the skyline, their snipers trained on the ruins. They weren't there to rescue. They were there to secure the assets. "Here come the new bosses," Butcher muttered. "Same as the old bosses, just with better dental plans." Diana stepped to the edge of the ruin, her silhouette a dark, imposing figure against the morning sun. She didn't draw her sword. She simply stood there, the lasso of truth trailing from her hand like a whip of gold. "Let them come," Diana said. "I have much to tell them." As the first helicopter hovered over the tower, a voice boomed over a megaphone. "This is the United States Army. You're in possession of government property. Surrender the subject known as Homelander and step away from the edge." Diana looked at Homelander, then at Maeve, and finally at the soldiers in the sky. She felt a familiar fire rising in her chest, the fire of the Amazon. "This man is not property." Diana's voice carried over the roar of the rotors, hitting the soldiers with the force of a physical blow. "And this world is no longer your laboratory. If you wish to speak of justice, land your craft and speak as men. But if you come as conquerors, remember this. I have seen the face of your gods, and they are nothing but dust." The helicopters hesitated. The soldiers behind the glass looked at the woman in the bronze armor, the woman who had survived an orbital strike and broken a god. They saw the truth in her eyes, and for the first time in the history of the 21st century, the machine of state power blinked. The wind at the summit of the ruined vault tower was cold, biting through the tatters of Diana's scorched cape, but she did not flinch. The Black Hawk helicopters hung in the air like predatory insects, their blades churning the smoke into violent eddies. For a long, tense minute, the world held its breath. The soldiers, the pilots, and the generals watching through remote feeds were staring into the eyes of a myth. A being who had withstood the concentrated fury of a satellite strike and emerged not just unbroken, but transcendent. "Ground your craft," Diana repeated, her voice a low vibration that seemed to settle into the very bones of everyone listening. "The era of hidden masters is over. You will walk upon this earth as equals, or you will not walk upon it at all." The lead helicopter dipped its nose, and the pilot's resolve crumbling under the sheer weight of Diana's authority. Slowly, tentatively, the fleet began to descend, landing on the improvised helipads of the lower rooftops or hovering low enough for soldiers to fast rope down. They did not come with guns leveled. They came with the hesitant, jerky movements of men who realized they were stepping onto holy ground. As the military moved in to secure the site and to witness the broken remains of their superweapon, Diana turned back to her companions. Butcher was gone, having slipped into the shadows of the stairwell the moment the first boot touched the roof. He was a creature of the periphery, and his work in the light was finished. Mother's Milk and Huey were being tended to by army medics, their faces etched with a weary, shell-shocked relief. Queen Maeve stood by the edge, looking out at the city she had failed, and then helped to save. "They're going to want to study you, you know," she said, her voice devoid of its usual cynicism. "They'll want to know how you did it. They'll want to bottle you." "They will find that I'm a poor vintage for a bottle," Diana replied. She looked down at Homelander. He was being loaded onto a reinforced medical gurney. He was conscious, but the light in his eyes was different now. Not the burning violet of a god, but the soft, terrifying clarity of a man who finally understands the weight of his own shadow. He did not look at the cameras. He did not look at the soldiers. He looked only at the sky, as if seeing it for the first time. In the weeks that followed, the world changed with a velocity that left Vault's former marketing teams in the dust, and the truth trials became the most watched event in human history. Under the influence of the lasso, which Diana permitted to be used by a hand-picked international tribunal, the remaining executives of Vought International confessed to every atrocity, every bribe, and every cover-up. The corporation was dismantled, its assets seized to fund a global restitution program for the victims of Supe Collateral. Diana did not sit on the tribunal. She did not seek a throne. Instead, she became a nomad of the 21st century. She traveled from the ruins of Belane to the refugee camps of the global south, showing the world that power was not something found in a syringe, but in the simple, grueling act of helping one's neighbor. She mentored Annie January and a handful of other Supes who chose to stay, teaching them the Amazonian way, not of war, but of discipline and empathy. The Seven were no more. In their place was a loose confederation of individuals who wore no capes and accepted no sponsorships. They became the Sentinels of the Truth, acting not as a private police force, but as a reminder that the world belongs to the people, not the powerful. On the one-year anniversary of the tower's fall, Diana returned to the site. The stump of Vought Tower had been turned into a memorial, a park of olive trees and white stone dedicated to the lost children of the nursery. She stood at the edge of the monument, looking at the statue the people had built for her. It wasn't a goddess in gold, it was a woman in bronze, her hand outstretched in a gesture of peace. She felt a presence behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was, and the scent of cheap tobacco and old grief was unmistakable. "Still a bit much, isn't it?" Butcher asked, stepping up beside her. He looked older, his face more lined, but the manic edge in his eyes had softened into something resembling peace. "It is a reminder," Diana said, "lest they forget that the tallest towers are the easiest to topple. Vaught's gone, but there's a new bunch of tossers in Geneva trying to patent a biological stabilization field." Butcher grunted, staring at the trees. "Seems the world just can't help itself. They always want a shortcut to being a god." "Then we shall be there to remind them that gods are a heavy burden to carry," Diana said. She looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "And what of you, William? Are you still hunting shadows?" Butcher took a long drag of his cigarette and exhaled a cloud of gray smoke into the clean New York air. "Shadows are all I've got, love. But at least now, I'm not the only one who can see them." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of tourists and mourners. Diana watched him go, then looked back at the city. It was still a place of greed, of noise, and of a million small lies. But it was also a place where a young girl could look at a statue of an Amazon and realize that she didn't need a cape to be brave. Diana of Themyscira had come to this world looking for a way home. She hadn't found the path back to Paradise Island, but she had found something more important. She had found a world that was broken, and she had decided to stay and help it heal. And the 21st century was no longer the age of the manufactured hero. It was the age of the truth. And as the sun set over the Hudson, casting a long, golden light over the city, the princess of the Amazons knew that for the first time in 10,000 years, the world was finally ready to grow up. The collision of Wonder Woman and the universe of the boys was never going to be a simple clash of capes. It was a fundamental war of philosophies. Vought International was built on the idea that the truth is a commodity to be traded, and that heroism is a brand to be managed. Diana of Themyscira arrived as the ultimate disruptor, a being for whom the truth was not a choice, but a divine mandate. In the end, the what-if scenario reveals a hard reality. Even the most powerful being in the world cannot save a society that refuses to see itself. Diana didn't just defeat Homelander, she dismantled the system that created him. By forcing the world to look into the light of the lasso, she stripped away the comfort of the lie, leaving humanity with the terrifying, beautiful responsibility of its own future. And the status quo of the 41st millennium or the cynical 21st century may be dark, but as Diana proved, even the deepest shadows cannot survive the dawn when a goddess carries the sun in her heart. Homelander fell not because he was weaker, but because he was hollow. Diana stood because she was whole. The legend of the Amazon in the land of Vought remains a testament to the idea that some things, honor, truth, and genuine sacrifice, cannot be manufactured. They can only be lived. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.